Australia's Financial Intelligence Agency has launched legal action against one of the country's biggest banks, Westpac, accusing the bank of more than 23 million breaches of anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism finance laws involving, ASIC says, AUSTRAC says, $11 billion in transactions. Joining me now live from Melbourne is the National Politics Editor at the Herald Sun, James Campbell, and Digital Editor at Sky News, Jack Horton. I'm sorry with the acronyms, ASIC, AUSTRAC, etc., James, but it's the regulator in the banking sector and money laundering that's done this investigation. 23 million breaches is, I think, a systemic pattern of behaviour, of carelessness at best, of criminal inaction at worst, but $11 billion is a lot of money.
It is, but almost more interesting than the decision, than the actual numbers and the involved in the scale of the thing is the fact that they've actually gone to court about it. Normally you would imagine, and the way things have worked in this country in the past is the regulators have had a cup of coffee or a lunch with the banks and said, we don't like this, and they sort of pull their heads in. The fact that they've gone to court and they're actually suing them shows either a systemic change in the way in which the regulators are dealing with the banks in this country, or a particular exasperation at Westpac's failure to heed the warnings that they were given. And it's in their statement of claim that they were first they drew their attention to them on this in 2016. Clearly Westpac didn't do what they were told, and they've run out of patience with them.
I also think, though, AUSTRAC, particularly after the Royal Commission, doesn't now want to be seen in those cosy arrangements where they settle before court. Only a handful, as you rightly remind us, ever got to court. So I think this might be a new game plan for regulators post the Royal Commission, because they suffered a fairly significant reputational hit, I have to say, out of the findings. And Jack, you know, put the economics and the market reaction to one side. I'll talk to my economic panel about that. But this is a lot of reputational damage for one of Australia's big banks.
Yeah, and they definitely deserve it. I don't want to steal the thunder too much from your economic panel, but if you look at the share price, they're only down about 3%, which you'd think is quite surprising considering the actual fallout from some of these revelations. But one thing that actually came from the Banking Royal Commission is, well, there weren't really any significant regulations. So it's kind of, let's shame them, let's shine a light on very specific cases, but then nothing really changed at the end of the day. So I really hope that doesn't happen in this situation. But if you look at the punters, the people who are actually backing the bank, well, they haven't really punished it too much. That, to me, is quite telling.
Yeah, and it's not the usual corporate crimes that, you know, we tend to gloss over pretty quickly in the media and elsewhere. This, James, comes down in a couple of instances in the statement of claim to child exploitation offences, bank accounts connected to or indicative of the exploitation of children. Now, we know, particularly with the exploitation of children overseas, paid for by Australians, where children are basically raped per view via peer-to-peer platforms. One of the only ways the AFP can counter it is getting at the source transactions. Now, if banks are getting red flags but not pursuing them, letting them pass, as it looks like it might have happened in this instance, that's pretty damning.
Oh, it's just totally and utterly indefensible. The statement of claim includes a case in which a known child sex offender was sending money overseas. Westpac shut down one bank account but failed to shut down others, and the money continued to go overseas, and to what end we do not know. I think that the fact that it's, you say, it's not white collar criminals, it's not of the usual nature, it's really, you know, some very icky stuff Westpac has allowed to take place under its nose, is, you know, horrendous reputational damage for a bank.